Lead me to some soul today. Oh, teach me, Lord, just what
Welcome,
to
everyone,
say.
to episode number 79. It's hard to believe, but this is number 79 of a series of episodes that we're calling Leading Others to Christ. My, name, my name is Dan Barker, and I'm one of the evangelists at the Vestavia Church of Christ that's located in Vestavia Hills, Alabama, which is just south of Birmingham. And those of you that know me, you know that I'm passionate about evangelism. And I have been ever since I obeyed the gospel when I was 21 years old in Owensboro, Kentucky. And I've always, ever since then, I've been striving to learn how to do this. And we're all teaching the same gospel, but there's different ways to teach. I say all the time, there's different ways to teach the way. Um, but I've been striving to learn how, and I've done this almost in every episode using some biblical terms of how to teach others, how to sow the seed, to how to fish for men and women, how to make disciples, how to persuade men and women, as Paul said, and to teach others how to teach. Always trying to remember what Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:2. And the things that you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these, and I love this, commit these to faithful men, obviously, and women, who will be able to teach others also. And then later in the chapter, he talked to Timothy about being useful for the master. I think that's one of the goals we all should have is how can I personally be, how can you be personally useful for the master? So I came up with this idea of a podcast and how to identify the Christians out there wherever they might be, men and women, fellow workers who are doing this, who are reaching and leading others to Christ in their community. And once we've identified them, to interview them and find out where they're located, how they're doing, what they're doing, the challenges perhaps that they have. And so that's why we're here today. And we're so excited today to have with us, as you can see there on the screen, our brother Curtis Cook. Welcome, Curtis.
Hey, brother, how are you?
I'm doing well. How's the weather in Boston?
35. It's a little balmy.
A little balmy. You know, it's a little warmer than that today here in Birmingham, but it's raining. It's supposed to rain all day. But you know what? This is our first year in Birmingham. We didn't have any We didn't have any snow. I'm I'm excited. Yeah, no snow this year. But anyway, we're you know, I've said this in so many of the interviews of the persons, and I need to figure it out. Probably 80% of the people I've interviewed, I've never met. But I had the pleasure of meeting this guy today a couple of weeks ago when Curtis and his family, they were here at Vestavia. And I was so glad I got to meet you, Curtis.
Yes, sir. It was a pleasure to be down there to see the folks. They support me down there. So it was good to pop in and say thank you to the congregation there for their support of the work up here in Boston.
Well, they love you and your family. They really are proud of the work that you're doing there. We always start this out, and I know, Curtis, you had a chance to listen to a couple of the interviews, and I try to say pretty much to the same script, if you will. Probably going to change it. I don't know when, but sometime. I keep saying that, and I keep going back to the old thing. But start out with what I call the elevator pitch or the short bio. Tell everybody a little bit about Curtis, for where you were born, how old you were when you obeyed the gospel, and where you are now. Just kind of bring us up to speed.
I went to try out at Florida College. I didn't grow up in a Christian home, so my parents were not Christians at that time, and so I just was going down there to play baseball. I had tried out at one other college in Palatka, never got a call back, and so my dream was dwindling. It was in June or July when I went down to try out at Florida College, and they offered me a scholarship, and I can remember Carrie and Rich Leggett being down there. And they're kind of telling me that this is how it's going to be. You know, they're going to have to go to chapel. You're going to have Bible classes. It's going to be, a little bit different from where you're coming from, because they knew that I had kind of come out of the world in Jacksonville, Florida. That's where I grew up. I can remember, I didn't know anything about the Bible, but I could remember being excited about finally learning God's word. And when I was on my way down to school, I had a Bible. It had my name on it, but it had pictures in it. And so I was opening it for the first time. I'm on the way down to Tampa, and I'm looking through, and I got pictures in my Bible, and I got very embarrassed. And so I left that Bible in the car with my parents, and then I went down to Salvation Army and got a used Bible. I didn't know what I was getting. I got American Standard version, and it was hard to follow because the Bible class teacher was reading from something else, and so I had a lot to learn at that time. But I saw a different place. It was an upside down world at Florida College, and so the people that the sports people weren't the coolest guys in school. You know, it was really kind of an upside down world. And I saw people living the gospel for the first time. I'd never seen that before. People like Tommy Peeler, he was my Bible class teacher. And I could just remember, no matter how much I was playing a bad student or disrespectful in class or anything like that, he was still the same. And so he was constant, and he was being a light. And I didn't know it at the time. But I saw in him of the way he raised his children and the way they behaved, what he drove as a car. I mean, he probably didn't make a lot of money at Florida College being a teacher, but he drove a car that wasn't like the most pretty car in the world. And I think he did that on purpose. And so there were things in his life that he was doing for God. I'd never seen that before. And so I can remember being in the second year or the second class of his, and it was Old Testament poetry, Psalm 51. I had learned the story previously about David and Bathsheba and Uriah. And then Psalm 51, we're going through, and I might have even had my head down. And I heard that that God forgave David. And so the idea of forgiveness with David hit me like a ton of bricks, because I could relate to David. And I said to myself, well, if God could forgive David, then he could forgive me. And I went to, I had friends. I had a girlfriend at the time. I saw her family and the way that they carried themselves. And so all these points of examples. I saw all these examples of the Lord's people. And so I went to Don Truex, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and I said, I want to have my sins forgiven. And he asked me who I studied with, and I didn't know what that meant. I just thought that people went down to Florida College and they were in Bible class, and that's how they learned the gospel. And so I just said Tommy Peeler is who I studied with, but we had never kind of sat down across the table from each other and opened up, the Bible. I was just in his class. And so I told him that, and I remember I was very fearful of what it would be to take that step and not complete it. And so it was a big thing for me. But I was baptized that evening, and that was in 2005. And I took the Lord's Supper for the first time that evening as well. And so it was a wonderful thing to have your sins forgiven and the relief. Unfortunately, I would go on to kind of get back into the world. And so I really struggled. And I always kind of describe it as, when I should have been walking, I was crawling. And so I was fighting it, and I was fighting sin. Through all the darkness, I was just empty. I mean, just terribly empty. And I can remember praying, weeping in my bed when I was living with my roommates, of just, God, give me a woman so I could be a leader of a family, and that I could do something with my life, because I wasn't doing anything. I was just living for myself, and I was struggling. And a couple months later, I ended up meeting my future wife, and she was struggling spiritually, and she made a leap of faith, left Arizona and the things from Arizona, and came down to Florida. And so we crossed paths, and we took 6 months of dating, and then we were engaged, and then we were married. And then the next, kind of stepping stone for us is we had to get serious about our spirituality. And so we took our initial steps to get serious, and then we had to start learning the Word and really gaining, a heart for God. And we went two separate paths. She took her own path. She was actually rebaptized at the age of 30. And she just was 12 years old when she was baptized. And so she was on her path and I was on my path. I was learning about Isaac being a shadow of Jesus Christ. And I was learning that, Joseph didn't have the bloodline of Jesus Christ. Judah had the bloodline. And so these things I was learning in early 2013, 2014, it was hitting me because I was seeing how deliberate God was. God was deliberate for me, and I was not being deliberate for God. And one of the things that really changed my life was a meeting, as a meal outside of a Panera with my wife. And I'll never forget, we were the only ones out there sitting outside on a Sunday evening. And she was talking about what they were talking about in Bible class that morning. And it was the conversation of pornography. Is that grounds for divorce? And I was teaching the high school class at that time. And she said to me, "I'm so glad that my husband does not have a problem with pornography." And that was a line in the sand that was drawn. And I could lie and cross that, or I could tell the truth at that moment and be set free. God gave me the best opportunity in the world. And I saw it as an opportunity to come clean. And I said, I do struggle with that. And I have since I was 15 years old. And from that moment on, her mercy and her grace helped me. And I had a talk Wednesday night. So that was Sunday evening, and Wednesday night I was scheduled to bring the lesson there at Chelsea, where we were worshiping. And I just used that opportunity to be the subject of my own invitation. And I just confessed the sins that I had with me. And so I let them out and let light come in and clean it and clean it all out, uproot it. And I haven't had a problem with those things since that time. And just so thankful for that. But that's really, and this is a long way to get to where we're going, but that's really set the stage for me to start growing. I don't think that I would be here today if it wasn't for those types of things that happened in my life. And so I had to get rid of the things that were killing me, and so that in order for me to grow.
Well, that's thanks for sharing that. Just a lot of things there that we could talk about. Well, first of all, what is your wife's name?
My wife is Emily Cook.
Emily Cook, and
her maiden name is Tellinghusen.
Okay.
So that's a very interesting name there.
And you have children?
We have 4 children. So we have Lonnie, Howard, John, and Clara. Clara was born up here in Boston, and so she's a Boston baby. Our other children were born in Birmingham, Alabama.
So Claire's going to have a Boston accent. The others are going to. No, I met them the other day, and just a sweet family. And let's give a shout out to Emily of the role that she played, continues to play in your life. But it's just like with me. If it hadn't been for my wife, I don't know if we'd be sitting here. In fact, I could almost tell you we wouldn't be. I know you love Emily, and give her a hug and thank her for everything that you haven't thanked her in a while. But just think about that. And I've brought that up in a couple of interviews. Of sometimes we don't give our wives enough credit, and because the work that we do, we couldn't do it without them. And there's so many things. I think you can get to a point where it's almost like you take them for granted because they're going to step up and do this or that. But Emily helps you a lot, doesn't she?
She does, and she's growing up here in Boston. We started homeschooling up here in Boston, and so she has the 2 bigs and the 2 littles, and she's juggling, and she's making dinner and being an encouragement to me when I have to leave at 7 to go to a Bible study. She's cheering me on and rooting me on, and she's all behind me, and so it is a huge blessing. And you just see God's hand. Way back when both of us were praying for a mate back in 2009 or 2010. I'm just so thankful to God because He's the one that had us to come across each other's paths, and it was all His hand. And so God's providence. and just so thankful for him.
Those that know me, I love this, the subject, the providence of God. Do I understand all of it? No, but I love it. And there's been so many things that have come up in these interviews of different people crossing paths, and how did we meet, and how did that happen, and just so many things. But tell us, if you would, just real quick, a little bit about the group there, the congregation there in Boston.
So we've been here for about 18 months, and it is a smaller group. So, but I say that, but we have 70 people on our directory. That the last directory that we kind of published and put out to the group, we have about 70 people with all the kids and everything. And so it is a diverse group, and so we have people from different countries, and there's not a lot of people that are from Boston in our group, and so we're kind of from all over. Kyle Bennett and Hannah, they're he's the other preacher, and so his family's been up here for 5 years. They came from Dallas. There's some other couple, the Hudgens, they're from Texas. The Grottos, they're a family that was with the Hudgens, started back in 2011. So they were from New Jersey. And so we got people from all over, and it is a very young group. And so it's a very young group, and there's a lot of over 60%, I believe we calculated, kind of drew it up, and there's over 60% are first generation Christians. And so I think that's a special thing about our group.
No, again, we can talk about that for a long time. And I understand when you say it's a small group of 70, but that's another thing that's come up of the average size. There's two conservative congregations that are closing their doors a month, and there's a preacher shortage. Congregations are dying out. They haven't learned how to lead. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying this is real. They, for whatever reason, didn't learn how to get involved in the community and teaching other people. And you have the young ones that grow up. If there were no jobs there, they left. And then so many are small, and they're all my age or older. And they know that once they all die out, they'll end up closing the doors. But it's sad, because some of the things that we talk about on the podcast are things that people need to be stirred up about and realize the reality of this. What happens if we don't do the Lord's work? So that's it. Just a couple of things you said there excite me. That it's a diverse group, 70 people, over 60% first generation. See, that's exciting to me, because those people know what it's like to be on the outside, if you will. They know what it's like to be in sin and grow up in a different environment. And look at all the stories that you've got there of those people, of how they came to understand the truth and who taught them. And they can take that energy and tell those stories to other people there in Boston. So that's exciting to me.
Yes, they walk that walk, and so it's a good opening to be able to lead people to Jesus. This is what I've learned, and this is how I became clean and His.
You've done it already a little bit, but I want you to. I've done this not in every interview, but the question why. I try to keep everything kind of simple. Why is Curtis doing what you do today? You remember when you were a kid, did people ever come up to you and say, "Curtis, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Maybe at a time you said you want to be a professional baseball player or something, or you want to play baseball, and I remember when I was in the 4th grade, I had a basketball coach that I loved him. He was just a super nice guy. His mother was in charge of the school cafeteria. He had an older brother that played basketball at Western Kentucky University and played in the ABA. And so I wanted to be, from 4th grade on, if you said, I was Danny as a kid, Danny, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said a basketball coach. And I was able to do that. I actually even was a basketball coach at Florida College, as you mentioned earlier. But I've done a lot of different things in my life too. But why are you doing what you're doing? Somebody said, Curtis, why are you a preacher? Why are you doing this? You could be doing so many other things. Why are you doing this?
I think it's 2 reasons. One is definitely trying to help people come out of sin. I did it in my life, and it wasn't me. It wasn't anything about me. And if I had my choice, then I would keep those things with me and secret. And but I God gave me the opportunity, and I was learning about how He was doing things for me so that I could be with Him. And I wasn't being deliberate for Him. And so my choices were not being for Him, they're for myself. And so I think that if I'm just a normal guy, just a C student, a normal guy, and I think that I could help people with sin problem, um, because Satan is evil, and he will he'll tempt my children, and my sweet little children. He's going to tempt them to sin and separate themselves from God, and I don't like him. And so I want to teach people about what is right and the truth. The second thing is, I when we went up to Birmingham, I moved up there for a job with a furniture company, and so they're Christians. And Dean Harbison, Brian Tipton, they own the company, and so I worked with those guys, and they were just a good example for me how to raise a family, how to be a professional. I didn't deserve that job. I had worked and labored with them, and for some summers, and they gave me a job after I got married, probably very strategically. They waited for that moment while I was calming myself down. But I saw me get more responsibility, and I saw God bless us, and I was no salesman. And so I worked in the warehouse, and I would work in logistics for the company, the containers that were coming over and things like that. But then they said, "Do you want to be a salesman?" And I said, "Sure, that'd be great. It's a way for me to earn more money." And I didn't have a packet. I didn't have I just went out and I just started knocking on doors basically and making phone calls. But God made me successful. But I prayed about it. I prayed that He would bless our family. And 3 years into sales, Emily was able to stay home, and he just took care of us. And so that was very big for me, because I saw that if God would make me successful in dormitory furniture sales, then He would make me successful if I was preaching His word. And so it was just at that moment it hit me, and I was like, well, I don't know how to do this. And I started making phone calls to people like Patty Kindleball or Lloyd Barker, Phil Arnold up in Kentucky, and they were helping me and they were studying with me. And then all of a sudden, I'm doing the work. And then I got a phone call from Brethren in Boston, and they were looking for a preacher, and we didn't know what it looked like, but we said yes. And then the house sells in a weekend, and it took me 25 days to get fully supported. And so now we're here. And I prayed the same prayer that God would bless our work up here. And I just know that he'll do it, because He did it with furniture sales.
Well, yeah, it's Matt's already given me the signal. We get 5 minutes to go here. Can you believe that? Anyway, just and I've learned this over the years too, of just through personal experiences. But even though what you learned there in working, with Dean and the rest of the crew there, and learning and getting into sales, learning how to interact with people, how to build relationships with people, how to handle no, right, yeah, and and all those things are going to equip you, and you may not even realize it, but that God was answering your prayer with all of that, of getting you where you are better able to do the work that you're doing now. Let's real quickly go to, I call it the one thing, or not. No, let's not do the one thing yet. The conversion story. Is there a conversion story that you could share with us real quick of somebody that you've been involved in that became a Christian?
So there was one purple dot on Zillow, and we called for that rental house, and we were in talks the next morning. So one popped up. Kyle went over the next day and FaceTimed us, and we said, okay, we'll work on this. And so this is the house for rent that we're going to do, and that was it. It's on a 4-lane road, and there's about 900 cars that go by. And I was thinking, how can I use that? And I just put a sign out in my front yard that says Bible study ? And it says call or text, and it has my number. Well, that was probably November to the end of 2021. And into 22, there was a man that was walking down the street, knocks on the door, and he comes in. It was cold, so it was in March, but it was still kind of cold. And so we start talking, and he was saying that he was in the military, and he's getting older. He's about to die. He wants to figure the Bible out. And his name is Brian Toohey. And so Brian was serious. And so a lot of times, people want to study, but then they don't follow up. And so Brian was serious. And so I was going down to Florida actually. And then when I got back, I said, we'll study. And so he called me the day that he told me he would call me to figure out if we were going to study. And that was on a Monday. And I was going to be back on Tuesday or something like that, back in Boston. And we were going to study on a Thursday. And so he called me on a Monday or Tuesday, and he was ready to go. And so I had just got the fresh packet from Kerry Keenan about, how he leads someone through. And I was like, well, this will be it. And so we go through. And he grew up Catholic, and so very much a Catholic. And but he started to see that the Bible is the way that we determine what the truth is. And so at the conversion of Paul, this is over a course of about 15 studies or so. And he said, well, I need to be baptized, don't I? And I said, well, what does the scripture say? What is it telling you? And so we called Kyle, and we got our portable baptistry out, and we baptized him into Christ. And I'll tell you, he has planted himself in our congregation. He is assisting financially with people because he's able to do that. He is taking gifts to people. He's getting our kids toys from the Walmart. I mean, and he is going to some game nights or movie nights with some of the younger folks. And it is just a wonderful thing to see someone be all in for the Lord, because he knows that he's been in a bunker. He was a Marine. And so he's been in a bunker with 4 people, and 2 people walk out alive. And he doesn't know how to explain that. And so he is just so thankful to God for saving him and washing away his sins, and he's growing. And it's a wonderful thing to see. But all that happened because of, some Bible sign that was out in the front yard, and it had an impact on eternity.
Well, that's a great story. I'm doing a series. I call it What If, and it's we call it Invite Sunday. We started that here at Vestavia. I've done it before in other places, but with different themes. But this one is What If. So example there is, what if, number one, you hadn't moved to Boston? You wouldn't have been there when that guy walked by. What if you had moved in a different place? What if you hadn't put the sign out front, right? What if he hadn't responded to it? What if he hesitated and didn't come up and knock on your door? It just, providence of God is just incredible. And then I say this to people all the time too, the ones that have never led somebody to Christ. Once you've done it, then it's just like, oh my, look at the excitement that comes from that. And of course, we give God the glory, because it doesn't happen without God, because it's not about you and me. But whenever people experience that, that's when they can really get on fire for the Lord. And that's what we're trying to stir people up to do. We're going to have to stop here. But one thing, somebody's listening to this, Curtis, and you've gotten them excited. You've got them thinking about things. Maybe they ought to put a sign in their front yard. But they want to get involved in this. And there's not just one thing. You've heard me do it. But what is one thing you would say to somebody that they need to do or learn how to do to lead somebody to Christ?
I would say just pray for the opportunity. I think there's something very powerful about aligning yourself with the will of God. And he wants men and women to be saved. He sent his son so that they could be saved. And so praying for open doors and opportunities, and to see it with your own eyes, to see that increase with your own eyes is a wonderful thing. And so praying that prayer and aligning yourself with the will of God is what I would say, because that's what I have done. I'm a sinner and don't deserve what I have, and but I'm ready to see other people experience what I have.
Well, couple times, and you're very humble, and I respect that and appreciate that. But also, I want you to know the scriptures tell us that we are special. We are God's special people, and one of the things that we're all supposed to be doing is we're doing what you're doing is proclaiming the praises of Him who called us. So just encourage you and your wife to keep up the work there, and so proud of you, and I'm glad we did get to meet, and hopefully we'll be able to spend some time together in the future. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, have you got some contact information that you can share with them so they could call you or text you or however you want to do it?
Yeah, my cell phone number is 617-845-3361.
Okay. All right, brother. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time today, and there's so many more things we can talk about. Maybe we can do this again sometime. But we try to keep them fairly short. And unfortunately, it's my fault most of the time I talk too much. But just really do appreciate you and what you're doing there, and keep it up. And like I say, let's keep each other motivated and keep each other on fire. So,
I appreciate you and your example, because if I look forward in my life, my life looks like yours. And so people are doing it at your age, and you're setting the trail. And so I appreciate that.
Well, I hope you don't lose your hair. Other than that, Lord willing, right? All right, brother. Well, thank you so much.
Good day.
Melt my heart and fill my life. Give me one soul today.